So, good evening and welcome everyone online. Today, Rinpoche would like to introduce briefly the Buddha's turning the wheel of Dharma. So, as we say, today we commemorate the turning of the wheel of the Four Noble Truths. So, the first question that arises is who said this or who delivered that teaching? It is the Buddha who gave these teachings. As to who the Buddha is, I think you're all familiar with this. So, the day today is all about commemorating and remembering the kindness of the Buddha. Amongst the 12 enlightened activities that the Buddha carried out, this activity of giving the teachings is considered to be the most important. Okay, so as we say, the Buddha carried out the 12 enlightened activities. And of course, all of you can Google what are the 12 deeds of the Buddha, or there are many books that talk about this subject. So, of course, you have access to this material and you can come to understand what are the 12 deeds of the Buddha. However, Rinpoche says, I would like today to draw your attention to some details, perhaps, that they are not so obvious or so easily accessible in the internet or in the books that we have access to.
Oh, yeah.
So in this eon, we will have 1,000 Buddhas. Buddha Shakyamuni is considered to be the fourth Buddha of this eon, and the next one, the fifth, will be Buddha Maitreya. All of these 1,000 Buddhas of this eon have the common feature that they will all manifest enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. So Bodh Gaya will be the seat of enlightenment for all 1,000 Buddhas. And prior to coming into this world and manifesting enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, they will have a rebirth as deities in Tushita. So the being who became Buddha Shakyamuni, so the previous incarnation of our Buddha Shakyamuni was the region of Tushita. He was born at Tushita. And when the time came near for him to come into this earth, through great light, he authorized Maitreya to be the regent in his absence, the regent of Tushita. And having authorized Maitreya to be the regent, he then came and was conceived in the womb of his mother. So this is the first activity. It is described as transferring from one location to the other, or sometimes it is described as the descent from Tushita. So at the time of his conception, his mother had a vision or a dream, and in that dream, he saw a white elephant with 6 tusks. And actually, the aspect of this elephant has particular significance. So it signified that the being who was coming, who was going to be our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, would be someone who would perfect the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections are very powerful means, and the elephant is a very powerful animal. So the presence of the elephant signified that power of the practice, and the 6 tasks signified the 6 perfections. So it was a clear indication. So the other aspect that we want to discuss is how Buddha Shakyamuni took rebirth, because his rebirth was a choice of rebirth of choice. In our case, we only experience ordinary rebirth that is controlled through karma and afflictions. We do not have any choice. We are not in control of this process. However, apart from this type of rebirth, which is rebirth due to the karma and affliction, there is always rebirth through compassion. There is other rebirth, which is rebirth through prayer. And there is also rebirth according to one's wishes. So in the case of Buddha Shakyamuni, it was rebirth exactly according to his wishes. So, for example, some bodhisattvas who have obtained higher levels, according to their prayers, they can make the prayer and they say, may I be reborn as an ordained being in Tushita, heaven, and they are born there. Others, they take rebirth, as we say, through compassion, and again, through the power of the prayer, they would, or in their compassion, they would say, I want to be reborn in this place, in this family, at that time, and then that rebirth is actualized. And also in terms of some hearers, also, they have the power to be reborn according to their prayers. Okay, then, of course, after conception and after the prescribed time, he was born, and there were many miraculous signs and occurrences at his birth, how he walked immediately after birth, how he was, how he said, I'm supreme in this world, and he was praised as such, and so forth. There are many details. We will not go into these details, though. Okay, so as he was growing up, of course, he was trained in many activities and many sports, and he would participate in many sport competitions. He would always come up first because of the strength of his body. So there are accounts of, for example, he was so good at throwing the arrow that they would place many targets at a certain, every target would be away from the other a certain distance. And altogether, this would cover quite a long distance. And he was able, by throwing just a single arrow, to pierce all of them, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so he was always the first. He was the best. Now, this arrow competition took place in the location where his future wife was. And because he came first, he won the competition, she offered him as a prize an elephant. We will skip a number of the dates of the Buddha. So, for example, how he got married, how he enjoyed the life in the palace, and so forth. And then we come to the next date, which is the date of ordination. There are specific features in that date that we need to understand. So when our teacher took ordination, at that time, for the sake of sentient beings, he gave up his wealth, his enjoyment, his possession, and his big name. So although there are a few who give away, let's say, possession or wealth, it is actually very difficult to give away your good name, your reputation, your fame. And because this is difficult to do, this is something that we should really rejoice. Similar to what our teacher did for his ordination, we notice a similar activity, a similar event in the life of Je Rinpoche of Lama Tsongkhapa. When the Emperor of China invited him, he refused. He refused to go. And it is similar. This is an event in which we rejoice because it shows how he was not interested in this fame, this big name, this reputation. So if we were to put this in our case, like in an ordinary example, if someone, the head of state, were to issue an invitation and say, come, I mean, we would be overjoyed. We would not decline, right? And we would become very famous, instantly famous, that we were invited. So the fact that our teacher gave away the fame, the reputation, and the fact that Je Rinpoche also gave away, refused to, encourage this fame trip, is something that we should recognize and rejoice. The next activity we want to look at is the practice of austerities. So our teacher practiced austerities for 6 years, and through his efforts, he obtained calm abiding, he obtained special insight, and he obtained the actual states of all the levels of concentration. However, he was not satisfied with this achievement because he recognized all those things as just being qualities, samsaric qualities that ultimately do not establish the benefit of sentient beings. And therefore, he made the choice to rise from this type of concentration, to break this type of austerities, to break this type of practices, and engage in, he went out for the practice of begging. And this was actually a very strong message and an example for future disciples to indicate that if you just continue with those practices merely give you some samsaric achievements. However, they do not become the cause of omniscience, that is what is necessary for the sake of disciples. And therefore, he indicated how we put an end to the coarse mind, we leave behind these type of practices and concentrations and seek something further. So the next activity we will look is enlightenment at Bodh Gaya. But prior to this, we need to look at some details. Once the Buddha was practicing, two people interacted with him. They came from the nearby village. One of them was a male called Tashi, and Tashi was actually, he had grass. So the grass that he offered to the Buddha to make a seat, to sit upon. But Tashi was of the lowest Indian class. And then there was a girl who was leading the cows every day. Her name was Lenkema, and Lenkema means a girl of good birth. So she was of a good birth, higher caste. She was the one who offered milk and curd to the Buddha, whilst Tashi offered him the grass for his seat. And the Buddha said, if you're coming here every day and making these offerings to me, we should all eat together. And at that time, they only had one bowl or one cup. So when they would drink water, the Buddha would first offer this cup of water to Tashi, who is the person of the lowest caste, and then he would be the second one to drink, and then the girl will be the third. And that is very significant because actually this signifies that the Buddha indicated with this that if you are a follower of me, we're not going to look at caste, we're not going to look at lineage, high family, low family, anything like that. So it was from the very beginning, it was a very clear rule. And actually, that individual, Tashi, who was of lower lineage, the Buddha ordained him to indicate that lineage is not important. Anyway, continuing from that, we have now come to the month of Sakadawa. It is the 15th, the full moon of Sakadawa, which is when the Buddha obtained enlightenment. So he already was on the path of accumulation, and then starting with the path of preparation, this is described as enlightenment in one sitting. And this indicates that from the evening where the meditation session begin, he would have to complete the path of preparation up to from the heat, peak, patience, supreme mundane dharma, and then the path of seeing, and then the path of meditation. And at the time of dawn, he would obtain the path of no more learning and reach enlightenment. This is enlightenment in one sitting. Or another important thing that we need to mention here is before Buddha Shakyamuni reached enlightenment, he had to overcome the maras. So why was it that the Maras were creating obstacles at this point? It is because when the worldly deities, and especially the powerful, the big worldly deities, understand that someone reaches enlightenment, they cannot remain in this location. They have to leave. So they have to leave their post and go somewhere else. And this they find very irritating. And therefore, they were trying to create obstacles so that our teacher would not become enlightened. And the way that they tried to do this was they tried to destroy or distract his concentration by attacking him with arrows and other weapons. And also they manifested aspects of dancing ladies and so forth, anything to distract the concentration. And the Buddha, or the being who would become the Buddha, meditated on compassion, and with this concentration on love, he overcame the Maras. So he didn't employ other means, other types of meditation. And it is said that this is for the sake of future disciples. So this is actually a lesson to disciples. In terms of our body, often we experience illness and sickness and so forth. So we often call this the Mara of sickness. In terms of our mind, often we engage, we interact with others, things do not go well, the others are upset, we become angry, and so forth. So this is again another type of obstacle, another type of Mara. So what the Buddha indicated is that when illness and disease arises, there's no reason to be upset. Just understand that this is previous karma from your previous life, which manifests as an illness now, and it is purified. Then if you're dealing with someone who is aggressive or unfair towards yourself, again, there's no point in becoming aggressive, but rather you should meditate on compassion and think, this person must be upset. This person must be under the influence of afflictions. This is what is going on in their mind. This is why they're behaving in this way.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing we need to discuss here is the equipoise of the Buddha. In order to obtain this equipoise, of course, a certain type of training is required. And the unique feature of the Buddha is that having obtained this type of equipoise, the equipoise of a normal learner, then the question is, what will the Buddha do the next day? Will the Buddha rise? Will the Buddha visit another place? Will the Buddha talk? Will the Buddha teach, interact with other people? And how is this happening? So the unique feature is that once the Buddha remains in that equipoise, at the same time, he's able to engage in all these activities of post-equipoise. In our case, this is not possible. When we meditate, we meditate. We do not talk or travel or interact. Or if we are busy talking and traveling, it means we are not meditating. But for the Buddha, the special feature is that equipoise and post-equipoise are equal. They are the same. There's no difference. And this is also indicated by the hand mudras of the Buddha. So the right hand mudra is the mudra of giving the teachings, and the left mudra is the mudra of equipoise. So by showing the mudra of equipoise, the Buddha is actually urging us, encouraging us, say, you should also train in equipoise. You should also achieve this. So we have to consider a little bit what is this message? Because we say, okay, in the future, I will become a Buddha. I will develop this equipoise of normal learning. However, this is a particular type of result. And for this result is result of a similar type to its cause. So you must have a cause that is similar to the type of the result that you will achieve. And what is the cause for achieving that resultant state is the fact that we train in meditation. we train to develop this type of equipoise. As a result of this, we will obtain the equipoise of normal learning. So as Master Shantideva says, is there is nothing that does not become easier with familiarity. So if you begin training in that equipoise, in that meditation, even though it's difficult in the beginning, it will become easier. We described the enlightenment of the Buddha as enlightenment that was achieved overnight, in one night. And what that actually means was that he was able to overcome afflictive obscurations and knowledge obscurations. If we want to present this in terms of objects of abandonment, we can classify the objects of abandonment as coarse objects of abandonment, then fine objects of abandonment, and a third category, which is the most subtle objects of abandonment. So the first one, the coarse objects of abandonment, which are imputed concepts, imputed obscurations, are abandoned on the path of seeing. So what do we mean here about imputed obscurations, imputed afflictions? Imputed are the ones that are intellectually acquired. So let's say you end up in the wrong Dharma center with the wrong teacher. So let's say you end up in a Hindu school. So when you go there, obviously the Hindu teacher will teach you Hindu philosophy. And one of the concepts or the principles they have is that sound is permanent. So you will be trained to think that sound is permanent. So this is something that comes through education, through something you acquire it intellectually through study. So this is the first type of imputed or intellectually acquired thing that needs to be abandoned, and it is abandoned on the path of seeing. Then following that, we have to abandon innate obscurations. So innate obscurations will include our anger, attachment, and many other things. These are abandoned during the first 7 impure grounds. And then what is left is the third level, which is knowledge or cognitive obscurations. These are extremely subtle. They are the root or the imprints of our afflictions, and they're abandoned through the last 3 grounds, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. So once you complete these rounds of abandonment, you reach the path of normal learning, and you are a Buddha, an enlightened being. So we say that the final result is the result of becoming an enlightened Buddha. If we look at the word for Buddha or the enlightened, in Tibetan it is 2 syllables, Sangye. So sang indicates purification. So for example, when it's dark, and you get rid of that darkness, you achieve that level of clarity, which is comes through purification. So this is this actually, the first syllable, the sang, indicates that the Buddha overcame the 2 types of obscuration. He overcame them, he abandoned them through the use of antidotes. And then, having completely removed the 2 types of obscurations, he was able to directly realize all phenomena. And this refers to the second syllable, ge, which means to expand, right? So sangye, you purify and expand, or the other term we have for Buddhahood or for Buddha, jangchup. So once the Buddha reached enlightenment, it is said that he pronounced these words, saying, "I have found a nectar-like Dharma, which is peaceful, profound. It is peaceful, profound, uncontaminated, and uncompounded. If I were to teach it, no one would understand it. Therefore, I will remain silent and live in the forest." It is said that with this proclamation, he's actually referring to the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The words peaceful and profound refer to the first teaching, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. The next refers to the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, and the one that says it is uncompounded refers to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma that also includes Tantra. So in effect, the Buddha was saying, I have all these different levels or different types of teachings to give. No one would understand. And therefore it said that the Buddha remained without teaching for 7 weeks, 49 days. Now, according to the Pali presentation, indeed the Buddha was inactive in terms of teachings, didn't speak, didn't give any teachings. However, according to the Sanskrit Mahayana tradition, there is not a single instant where the Buddha is not teaching. So even the mere breathing in and breathing out of the Buddha is communicating, and it is for the benefit of sentient beings. Therefore, the interpretation that we have is that during the period of 49 days, although the Buddha did not teach in this world, he was giving teachings to other disciples in other universes.
Oh, yeah.
So the next activity we want to see after enlightenment, and having explained this, is how the Buddha proceeded to Varanasi and turned the first wheel of Dharma in Deer Park in Varanasi, teaching the Four Noble Truths. And this is the occasion that we commemorated today. So there are a few things to discuss here. So the reason why the Buddha eventually proceeded to Varanasi and he gave the teaching was that a request, an official request for the teaching was made. So this, the tradition is, and the proper protocol is, that if a request is not made by someone who is sincere, who has faith, and request in a respectful manner, then the teaching is not given. So up to that point, no one had requested the Buddha. But at this point, the king of gods, Indra and Brahma, Indra made the request, and then Brahma offered a 1,000-spoke golden wheel to the Buddha, asking him to teach. And as a result of this request, he proceeded to Varanasi and then gave the teaching. So this is an important feature, the feature of the greatness of the Dharma and needing to show respect. And the way that we show respect is that we organize a special seat, elevated seat, and a throne for the teacher. Many days, these days, many people say, oh, you know, it's all for showing off, and, you know, it's just like 2 high thrones to elaborate, or the lamas are requesting 2 high thrones. It is not like this. This is the right procedure. From our side, we have to offer the throne, we have to offer the high seat, because this shows our respect for the greatness of the Dharma. The Dharma is the representative of the teacher, our teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, and we need to show respect. So the Buddha proceeded to Varanasi, and specifically he went to the location where the 5 disciples, the ones who became the 5 close disciples, were residing. So these 5 practitioners were practicing together with the Buddha when the Buddha, during the 6 years that the Buddha practiced austerities. When the Buddha started practicing austerities, the king of this area actually sent many people to serve the Buddha. But it was understood that, you know, when you have the commotion of many people running around a meditator who is trying to practice, they would disturb him. And therefore, the majority, you know, the Buddha and the king understood the majority of those people had to leave. However, those 5 remained with the Buddha whilst the Buddha practiced austerities. They also practiced austerities, and they had great regard for the Buddha and his practice. And they served him. They were like his attendants. However, later on, the Buddha took food. He started eating. And when they saw that, they thought that because he was not practicing austerities anymore, he had also given up the effort to find the correct path. And being very disappointed, they left him and they went to Varanasi. So now the Buddha is coming to Varanasi, and they can see that someone is coming close. And as he's getting closer, they recognize him. And they say, oh, there comes Siddhartha, the one who abandoned the practice of austerities. And amongst them, he said, make sure you do not serve him. Make sure you don't give him a seat. Make sure you don't offer him anything. You don't serve him. You don't show respect. Just don't do anything. However, when the Buddha approached, there was something so magnificent in the presence of the Buddha. It was radiant, magnificent. And just looking at the Buddha, you couldn't help it, both physically and mentally. You felt elated. So there was this spontaneous reaction to directly meeting the Buddha. So even though they had made a pact amongst themselves that we will not offer anything to the Buddha, they found themselves sweeping the ground, making a seat, making a throne, offering, just being very humble. And the Buddha says, I have found the nectar. So immediately, spontaneously, with great faith, said, please teach us. So that was now a second request for teaching the Dharma. Mm-hmm. And it is very good to make this request to receive the teachings, because it places the imprints so that in the future, in future lives, you will continuously have the opportunity to receive teachings. Yep. So the way that the Buddha taught to the disciples was on the basis of his experience. So what he indicated that prior to having the realization of the Four Noble Truths, he experienced suffering. So the first thing that he taught was suffering. And then he says, after that, I realized the Four Noble Truths. And the presentation that he gave is called the order according to his own experience. So this is based on the principle that we all wish to have happiness and nobody wishes to experience suffering. So this is common for myself and everybody else. So he's saying that if you want to experience happiness, you have to increase this through the practice of the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And if you want to avoid suffering, you have to abandon the origin and the suffering. So the truth of origin and the truth of suffering. So the way that the Buddha taught was that, first of all, he introduced the truth of suffering. Second, he introduced the truth of origin. Third was the truth of cessation. And the fourth was the truth of the path. However, in some texts, we find a different order. And the order begins with number 1, the truth of origin. Number 2, the truth of suffering. Number 3, the truth of the path. Number 4, the truth of cessation. So this second presentation that we find in the text is the presentation according to the cause and result. Cause and result, cause and result. Was the presentation that the Buddha gave is the presentation according to his experience, which is also our experience. So to put this into perspective through an example, imagine someone who becomes sick. So manifesting the illness is the initial experience of suffering. So when that person becomes sick, they go to see a doctor, because when they go into the doctor will examine them and recognize the type of illness they have. They have to be diagnosed. So the doctor will say, you have this and this illness. But through the examination of the doctor will recognize the causes of the illness. So is it something that you ate and was not appropriate for you, or is it something in your conduct, in your everyday behavior? And if, let's say, the doctor understands the cause or explains to you the cause, they explain the truth of origin. So then they say, if you want to recover from this illness, you have to give up this and this thing that you're doing, which is wrong. And when you give that thing up, when you abandon this, then you will recover. And there is well-being, there is happiness with recovery. And in order to obtain that full recovery, you have to rely on the medication, which is the truth of the path. When the Buddha taught, he actually taught the Four Noble Truths in what is called 3 phases or 3 rounds. So in the first round, he introduced the concept of the Four Noble Truths. In the second round, he said, you should understand suffering, you should abandon the origin, you should actualize cessation, you should meditate on the path. And then in the third round, he said, there's no other activity beyond that. So this is all you have to do. You don't have to do anything more than that. Recognize it, understand what you need to abandon, do it correctly. So that's it. So as the Buddha gave the explanation of the Four Noble Truths, the group of 5 actually generated the realization. And usually there is also a physical and emotional reaction that someone outside, an outsider, can't perceive. So, for example, having the reaction of your hair standing, or tears coming involuntarily, crying, and so forth. So these are signs of realization. And of course, as the Buddha was teaching, from amongst the 5 disciples, the first one, which is called Kondana, he was the elder. He was the one who was the first who reached the path of seeing. And the Buddha could see that. He understood that. So the Buddha proclaimed, I have turned the wheel of Dharma. And then following that, the other 4 also. But there was, from amongst the 5, there was one who did it first. All right.
Yeah.
And when that happened, also the deities of the worldly deities, they proclaimed, the Buddha has turned the wheel of Dharma, and they all rejoice in this activity. So we have this expression, turning the wheel of Dharma. So what does that indicate? If we look at the example of a car, right, and you have the wheel, when the wheel is in motion, when the wheel is turning, you relinquish the previous position and you move into a new position, right? So the wheel goes from position A to forward position B, isn't it? So the Buddha, within his mind stream, had the realization of the Four Noble Truths. The realization itself is not transferred, but through his explanation, the disciples also generated a similar realization. So the wheel moved from one position, which is the Buddha, to the disciple. So now it has come, the realization is generated in the disciple.
Yep.
So this is what we commemorate today, which is known as Chökhor Düchen. Düchen means the holy day or the special time, and Chökhor means the turning of the wheel. So the special day commemorating the turning of the wheel of Dharma. So on that particular day is when the Dharma jewel came into this world. The Buddha jewel was already existent, but the Dharma jewel was established or came into this world on that particular day that we commemorate. So when we go for refuge, we go for refuge by saying, first of all, I'll go for refuge to the Buddha. And the Buddha came into this world or became an enlightened Buddha in Bodh Gaya. So that was the first event that happened. And then after that, we say, I go for refuge to the Dharma. I go for refuge to the Dharma. And this is the second thing that happened when the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma. And he passed on both the transmitted Dharma by giving the transmission, the explanation of the Four Noble Truths, and also the realizational Dharma, the realized Dharma, because the disciples realize that Dharma. So I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, and then we say the third one, I go for refuge to the Sangha. Because now those 5 disciples, when they generated the realization, they became Arya beings. So you have 5 Arya beings plus the Buddha in addition to this. So you have 6. So now you have the group of Sangha. So when we go for refuge, we never say, I go for refuge to the Sangha. We don't begin with the Sangha. The Sangha is the third. And this order of refuge reflects the order of these events. First, enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, then turning the wheel of Dharma, and then having the group of Sangha. When the Buddha actually introduced the Four Noble Truths, he used the phrase that says, this is the truth of suffering. So he was talking about something very specific. So this is the truth of suffering. So what is the truth of suffering? He's referring to the aggregate, in particular the body, the aggregate of the body that is contaminated and appropriated. So the types of bodies that we have come as a result of karma and afflictions. Therefore, karma and afflictions are the causes that establish this type of aggregate that is suffering, and they are the origin. And obviously, the second instruction is that we need to abandon this origin, this karma and affliction that creates this. It's very important to understand the truth of suffering in this way, because often we talk about samsara, and we have this notion that samsara is the truth of suffering, but we have this notion that samsara is something outside, something external, like you step outside your house and this is samsara, right? Samsara is outside, which it is. Samsara is a location of suffering. However, this, you could say, it's like the shared location of everybody's suffering. But the main suffering, the main truth of suffering, is one's own private samsara, one's own private suffering, which is one's own private body, one's own aggregate. And it's not just my body, because every living being actually has a body. So every living being has their own private, individual truth of suffering. And there is a lot of discussion of whether you can abandon this, or there can be an end to the truth of suffering. But Rinpoche has actually indicated very clearly that yes, you can put an end to this personal truth of suffering, and in this way actualize liberation.
Oh, yeah.
So the most important message that we have from this presentation is that the truth of suffering, or this aggregate that we have, is the result of karma and affliction. And it's actually the result of true grasping. And if we generate the realization of emptiness, we will be able to put an end, to stop, to completely destroy this true grasping. If we put an end to this self-grasping, there will be no karma created, and there will be no afflictions. So if we do not create any karma, we do not create any afflictions, it means we will not have to take another rebirth under the power of karma and afflictions. And therefore, in this way, the thinking is that yes, there is such thing as liberation, because once you abandon the affliction of ignorance, then that's it, you put an end to it. If you stop the cause, it means you will stop the result. And there is a great message in this, because it indicates that yes, one day we will reach enlightenment in this way. And the second thing is that we have the capacity to do this. So if we train, if we meditate, it is within our power to reach this. So Rinpoche would like to say that today we have used up all the time. So we have come up to this point. We will continue this conversation in the future. So we have to, next time we resume this subject, it has to be from the point of abandoning the cause. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rinpoche is asking if there are any questions. We have many friends online, Rinpoche, 117 friends,
Yes.
but they are all very happy.
Okay.
They have no. I didn't read.
Your happy is my happy. Okay. Thank you.
So nice.